housekeeping notes here before we get going. Voice lines are going to be muted for the duration of the webcast. If you have a question that you would like to ask, in your WebEx control panel, if you're able to see that, at the far right-hand side, you'll see a drop-down arrow box. If you click on that, you will see Q&A options, and that'll launch the Q&A screen if it's not already visible on your machine. Okay? So please use that, or you could use the text chat box for submitting questions to our speaker. And finally, a recording of the webcast is going to be made available to everybody after the event. I understand some people may be having audio problems because they didn't use the call-in. They were trying to use the VoIP-enabled audio, which is not enabled for this call. So thank you very much for attending, and let's go ahead and move forward. First of all, what I'd like to do is let you know a little bit about Visible Technologies and also our speaker today. Visible Technologies is a social media monitoring and analytic platform that helps clients at the enterprise level and also slightly smaller understand what is going on in social media that relates to their products and services, helps them develop insights around their businesses and the perceptions on social media. We do that through a very, very robust platform, and we also do that through a team of insight specialists. And our speaker today, Mark Brandt, is actually the leader of that group. Mark's been in the social media business for a long time now, working with clients to help them develop insights around what is happening in the social media channels. And he'll be a great speaker for us today to address how to mitigate negative brand perceptions by first understanding some of the issues, the underlying issues, and moving forward from there. So without any further ado, what I will do is turn the baton over to Mark. And again, if you have any questions, please use the text or the Q&A chat. Thank you. Mark?
Thanks, Rich. Hello, everyone. I am going to talk today, and we've got the agenda screen up here. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about negativity to start with, and we've got a couple of different scenarios that we're going to profile. First is a crisis scenario, something that happens related to an event for a brand, and then a persistence of negativity, something that continues in terms of negativity for the brand over the long term. So the meeting really today is going to focus more on how to cull or glean insight from negativity in the persistence issue. And in order to do that, I'm going to profile for you our research approach, just a bit about our methodology for how we analyze social data and apply our market research techniques to social content overall. From there, I'm going to talk a little bit about the actual insights that we can glean from the content, what it means to you, and then from there, what you can take away from that, actionable insights, and how to take the things that you learned from the negativity about your brand to craft appropriate responses and actionable follow-ups. So in our first set here of slides, I'm going to talk about how negativity can manifest itself among branded conversation and how to analyze that. So what I'm going to do is show a couple examples, like I mentioned. There's two specific scenarios that we want to call out, the crisis scenario and the persistence scenario. So the first one I'm going to talk about is what I like to call a crisis event. So a crisis event can really be something such as an offensive tweet or a mistake by an employee using a corporate handle. We've all heard stories like this about what they call brand failures in social media. So these aren't necessarily new to most of us. Our example for this particular scenario in our presentation today is a tweet that was put out by American Apparel last year at the end of October, just before Hurricane Sandy, and it was mentioning a sale that was going to go on during Hurricane Sandy and sort of exploiting the fact that people were locked indoors. Obviously, people took offense to this, and there was some negative brand backlash from it. So what we can do, though, is monitor negative content around a brand event like this. No worries, no worries. So what I was saying is that when we see a crisis event like this, when we see a spike in negative content, we need to look at it and figure out what's happening and see what it can tell us. Monitoring negative content around an event like this can give us more information and really tell us how to respond. So one of the things that's sort of the telltale sign of a crisis event like this is a sharp negative spike in volume. And this often happens right after the event occurs, whether that's a tweet or a post. But what we also see is that negative comments in these types of scenarios often typically die off quickly afterwards, and they don't persist for very long. And of what happened on the event, so it's often accompanied by a large percentage of neutral. From there, like I said, the negative comments will typically die off quickly if correct responses are taken. And really, best practices tell us that there's three things that we can do to correctly respond to a situation like this, and that is obviously respond quickly, remove a tweet that might be offensive or a post that you made, provide an apology for that or an explanation of why it maybe happened. So from there, going to the next scenario, we're going to talk more about persistent negativity. And the situation in which negative brand perceptions really persist over time, and the example that we've used here is mentions of the company Monsanto and the mention of GMOs in food. So what we see is that often these types of persistent negative situations begin similar to a crisis event where they are a large initial spike, but it's followed by subsequent peaks as well. And we see that in the chart here, that as we go through the time period, there's a couple subsequent peaks. And then the last thing here is that the negativity is sustained and elevated throughout the remainder of the time period. Obviously, mentions of Monsanto and GMOs it's got quite a history on the internet and social media channels. And so we've looked at, on this chart, one particular time period of throughout 2010 when mentions of GMOs really became a little bit more prevalent in social conversation. And so you see that at the end of this month, in January 2010, a lot of the negativity persisted and negative volumes were elevated, and this just continues on for mentions of Monsanto and GMOs as we go throughout the next couple years in terms of time frame. So what we really see in these types of situations is that if we continue to monitor the negative content, it will help uncover themes about what's actually driving the negative content. So knowing that it's happening and being aware of it and analyzing the content to understand what people are talking about and why really helps us glean insight and uncover why these negative brand perceptions are persisting. And again, this analysis of the content is actually crucial to understanding why there's negativity that's persisting in the posts themselves. Okay, so as we move into actually looking at some of the ways to analyze the content, the first thing I wanted to talk to you about was how we approach the research here at Visible. We've got methodologies that we use in market research for social content. And so one of the things that we do is we look at a broad set of data to begin with. And this means that at a very broad level, within our software tool, we create searches to keyword match and bring back content that helps us understand what the entire universe of content is that we begin our research from. From that universe of content at the broadest level, we can then derive subsequent sets of data, and these can be built around specific business questions, brand messages, campaign messages, things that you want to really examine. And so our example for this particular presentation is mentions of GMO conversation. That's our broadest set of data, and it's very general. So from there, we've narrowed down to GMOs in the context of food consumption. We can go even further down and provide subsequent data sets at that point by focusing on content through the use of things like text queries and analytics, sentiment algorithms within our software tool, and then, of course, the human interaction of quantitative and qualitative analysis. And what this does is it really allows us to get at the most focused and granular level information that helps answer your questions. So we might be saying to ourselves, well, why is this important, at this point? It's important because just analyzing a very broad set of data can be a daunting task. And so what you want to do is have the most context and the most relevant information to answer your questions available to you. So, our use of these methodologies and our software tool really helps take out some of that heavy lifting and get at that data that's going to answer your questions most specifically. Okay, so now that we understand sort of the methodology and the research process a little bit better, I'm going to talk specifically about how to analyze the negative brand perception to uncover what's really going on and what it means to us. So our first question really should be, what is driving negativity? So at the highest level, we really want to understand what negative comments persist for our brand, and therefore we need to understand what people are saying exactly. So in order to do that, we need to isolate just the negative content itself, and through our Visible Intelligence software, we can extract just those negative posts and then look at conversation themes. One of our tools is popping up what we call prominent terms lists to show what are the most prominent themes and terms that people are talking about among this content. So in this particular example, we're seeing that the terms popping up here are things like GMO, corn, farmers, seeds, crops. So things that aren't necessarily surprising and are probably expected when people are talking about the Monsanto and the GMO topic overall. So at this point, this isn't super surprising, so I want to be able to dig a little bit deeper to understand what's going on within these conversations that's going to provide more insight for me. So one of the things that we do need to do is continue to monitor all of these negative conversations throughout time, and if any of these phrases or terms change, that's good, and we'll know that, and that'll provide us some insight. But at this point, we're going to slice down another layer and go even deeper. So our next tactic is to really kind of take a step back and say, are there any trends happening among data? And one place that I really like to start is looking at the media channel level. And so when I say media channels, I mean things like Facebook and Twitter, blogs and forums, and news, mainstream media sites online. So when we do that, we're really looking to see if there's any nuances or insights that can be gleaned from the distribution of where conversations are happening. So as we look at this chart that's on page 12 here, we see that one thing right away stands out. It's that Facebook content really ramps up and sees a significant increase as we go through the time period. So back in 2011 here, Facebook content made up about 1% of our conversation for Monsanto and GMOs overall. And then as we went into the middle of 2012, it was at over 30%, which is a pretty significant increase. So what I want to do then is look at what's happening among Facebook posts and what the conversation is talking about. So again, we've provided a pop-out here of some of the most prominent terms and conversation themes among the negative conversation just on Facebook. And again, a lot of the same terms that we saw in the last slide. So not a lot new here, but the bigger picture is that what we saw in terms of Facebook content overall increasing is a takeaway. So that gives us a little bit more direction now to go to the next step, which would help us provide a little more insight and gives us, again, direction around doing qualitative research. So now that we know that Facebook is driving a significant portion of content in our time period, and we did see an increase in it, what we want to do is dive in qualitatively and really get eyes on that content. And what I mean by that is reading posts, looking to see if there's any trends, and seeing what people are actually saying. So one of the things that we see right away when we look at Facebook content and read through posts is that there appears to be a lot of protest groups, local activists, organizations that are using Facebook, and what they're doing is they're really using the channel as a way to organize, communicate, and share information. And this is not atypical of what we see on Facebook for topic areas like this. Facebook is really used as a channel for like-minded individuals to get together and share information and really create social communities. So of the social communities that we saw and the way people were sharing information, we've pulled out a few examples here for you from the Facebook content. So one of the first ones that we see is this group called Millions Against Monsanto. And this is really a large group that shares information throughout their Facebook page that includes links to articles, includes facts, and things that are specific, very specific to the Monsanto and the GMO conversation or topic. The next group is March Against Monsanto. And again, this is a very large group on Facebook, but they're a little more local in nature, and they provide information and they help organize on a local level events such as marches or protests. And then the last group that we have here is a little bit of an outlier, and the reason I included this is to show that this happens as well among these Facebook groups. This one's called the Anti-Monsanto Project. It's a much smaller group. And they're not necessarily sharing specific information around Monsanto and GMOs. What they've done is they've really sort of leveraged the popularity of the GMO and the Monsanto topic to kind of push their own agenda. So as you can see here, the example post, they're talking about, you know, protesting or calling the president and mentioning things like shale fracking, which is not related to GMOs. So this is all interesting information, and it provides us a little bit more robust picture about how people are talking and where people are talking. But what else can we pull out of this data? So what other insights are there from negative content that we can pull? So one of the next things and methods that we use here is to apply filters to the data so that we can segment. Within our VI tool, we've got the ability to create what we call category filters. And what that really means is that we can build queries that we can overlay on topic areas that can be built around things like linguistics, things like life stage events, how people are talking about that they just bought their first car, maybe they bought their first house, that they just graduated from college, they just got married. We can also build category filters around things like geographic regions, mentions of designated market areas where people live, the markets that they might reside in. And then another way that we can do it is by gender. We can look at authors that have specific names that would be considered female versus male on particular sites that they talk. So the example that we've pulled out in terms of segmenting data and overlaid on the negativity that we saw for Monsanto and GMOs is the gender segmentation. So I've applied filters for the female and the male perspective here to really see if there's anything that we can glean from the conversation, the negative conversation about GMOs and Monsanto from both perspectives. Are they talking differently? Are they saying different things? You know, what are the differences that we can pull out? So it actually has yielded some interesting insights here, because what it's showing us is that females and males, in this particular case, they do talk very differently. So what we see is that from the female perspective, they're mentioning things like poisoned food, diagnosed with MS, things that really relate to the health concerns and the things health-related of the GMO and Monsanto topic. And then on the male side, we see terms like government, Obama, economic, political, and things that are really speaking more to the economic and the political aspect of the topic. So those are very nuanced conversations, and they're very much different from each other. So, you know, an initial question would be, why is this interesting? So what it really tells us is that the content is different between the two genders. Females and males talk differently about these things. So what that means to us is that the way we react to this negative content really needs to vary depending on which group we're speaking to. So, you know, if we're talking about sort of mitigating negative response or negative perceptions, a blanket action or a blanket outreach is not necessarily going to work, because the way these two types of people are talking are very different from each other. So that is important information as we, you know, continue doing further research, but also as we really develop a response and an outreach plan that is tailored to those audiences. So that kind of brings me to my final section here, which is key takeaways. And what I wanted to do was lay out some things to remember as we look back at what we've learned here. And so we laid out some really compelling ways to analyze negative content so that it provides us some actionable insight and some ways to understand what people are talking about. But these next three things are what we can take away from how we've analyzed that content. So the first one that I want to talk about is identify. What we really need to do, again, is look at the bigger picture. In a lot of cases, it's not necessarily what people are saying. In the example of Monsanto and GMOs, the fact that we see mentions of, negative mentions of GMOs and seeds and farmers and food crops and government and political aren't necessarily surprising things to us. Those are what we would expect to see. So if we take that step back and we say, maybe it's not what they're saying, it's where, how, or why they're saying it. And looking at it from that aspect of, are there specific media channels in which they're talking? Are there ways that, again, females are talking differently than males about the subject? So it's more about the where, how, and why they're saying it as opposed to what they are saying. The next one is inform. Really inform yourself. Know the story that the data is telling you. If you slice and dice and analyze the data appropriately, you'll have a more complete picture of what the data is actually showing us. And that way you'll be able to glean insights from different aspects and different nuances and really take away things that are actionable. The last one here is address. So once we've identified what the negativity is, we've informed ourselves with the facts, we need to develop a plan of action and address what's happening. So again, like the example of female and male conversations, what we need to do is craft responses appropriately. In some cases, a singular response isn't always the most appropriate. Different channels or different audiences may require unique responses because they may react to the topic of conversation very differently. So in the big picture, those are the three things that I wanted to leave you with, and that is all the information that I have to present. So I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to listen today, and I hope that we all find some of this information useful. So I'm going to turn it back to Rich now to finish up.
Great, thanks, Mark. Before we get to a couple of questions that were asked online, I just wanted to give you a quick little overview of Visible Technologies. Kind of our story in short is we are an analytic and monitoring platform that's built around two key strengths. One is data you can trust, and the other one is actually having the industry expertise to help you develop insights. What we do is we develop a platform and a set of services that help you target people through social media, collaborate with those people, act around the insights that you actually deliver. We help you integrate your social media strategies into other platforms, other forums, other data sources. And finally, we help you extend your enterprise, right? So working with other parts of your organization. And finally, here are just a few of our clients that we've worked with. So that's enough of the pitch for Visible Technologies. I do want to get to a couple of the questions that were out there. And one is actually kind of an extension of something that I just mentioned. Mark, this question came in when you were talking about the uptick in Facebook volume. The question came in, are you limited to the number of data sources that you can actually analyze within your tool? So we saw Facebook, we saw Twitter. What if there are other specific data sets of social media that we want to be able to analyze? Is there a way to do that?
There is. I included a limited number in the view that I had there just to make it a little cleaner for the presentation, but we do have a large number of media channels that we collect content from that we can analyze, and that includes certainly things more than just Twitter, Facebook, blogs, and forums. And we oftentimes will look to incorporate data like that on specific requests from our clients. If there's a specific site that we don't currently have in collection that they'd like to collect, we run that through the the sort of implementation process, and we can evaluate whether we have access to that site if it's publicly available data. But all of the sites that we collect from, we make sure to comply with terms and conditions of those sites so that everything is legal, and that all of the data that we're collecting is publicly available data.
Okay, great. So another question that came in was, as you were looking at some of the real deep details around male and female, what are some of the other pivots that you have around that? So for example, can I look at things by geography, or are there other canned pivots that I can look at data from, different perspectives that I can look at?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned a few on that slide. Things like geography were definitely one. We've done some extensive work around building filters around what I call designated market areas, that's geographic areas. We've also built an extensive set of filters around category and life stages. Things like I mentioned, buying a first house, buying a first car, having a baby, things like that. Things that we really sort of classified as life stage events. And we've got quite a few others in a sort of catalog that we have archived that is available to anybody that does work with us, that they can go in, and if it's of interest to them and they think it's going to help with their data set, or if we think it's going to help, we can apply that filter that we already built.
Okay, great. So the sharing of those filters.
Sure.
Well, not sharing the data and the detailed analysis, the filter itself can be shared and employed in different circumstances. Okay, cool. There was another question that came up about fracking, not being a Monsanto issue. That was something that the first time I went through the presentation I saw also, and I think what that does is it highlights the need to get deep into the data, because if you were just to look at the number of posts associated with that community on Facebook and assume everything was against Monsanto, you would be false in that assumption, right? I think the point was only by drilling down and looking at different communities within a channel are you actually able to see that somebody's hijacked it for some other, for a different cause, which may or may not be important to you as a person, but not necessarily important to the business issue that you're trying to assess. In this case, if you were Monsanto, what would it look like to peel the onion? Okay. So I'm looking to see, I want to give it just a couple of seconds here to see if there are any other questions that may come in. Looks like somebody's typing something here. Somebody asked a question, so is there a way to get alerts about my brand? Like if I'm Monsanto and I want an alert to go off because a certain threshold was crossed or a certain type of thing was said, or am I able to get alerts that are more push-oriented rather than me pulling the data toward me?
Yeah, we certainly have that capability within our tool, and one of the things that we also have the capability to do is provide custom tags for content classification. And so when we're reading through content in the tool, we may tag it as fitting a certain category, such as needs immediate response or something like that. And as content comes in and we are collecting it and it's matching tags and things, we can set up alerts for if things pass certain thresholds on a particular day or within a week. We can monitor that content and have it alert us that we need to respond to some of these things.
Great, great. Well, thank you everybody for your time. The objective of this was to have a relatively short webcast. I think we went about 30 minutes that outlined a couple of problems that people are facing right now, explained a little bit of our methodology for analyzing those problems, how you would go about peeling the onion to really get that insight. Whether you're working with our platform, you're working with another platform, hopefully you were able to walk away from it with a couple of things to think about. What layers of the onion do you need to peel within your own business problems to really truly get insight rather than just pure metrics? Hopefully this is our presentation was successful in that, and I hope you enjoyed your time with us. Again, we're going to be sending this out to everybody that registered for the webcast in the next couple of days, so you will have that recording if by chance you didn't get some of the audio earlier in the session. Thank you very much. Have a great week and a great long weekend coming up. Take care.